Hi guys, Martin Curry from Belief Media. I want to talk to you a little bit about AI and its impact on the mortgage industry. It's a conversation we need to have. It's a conversation the industry needs to have. It's a conversation that the industry is not having, at least not in the way that it should be approached. First and foremost, Domenico and I obviously have a very different perspective on AI. We're exposed to all sorts of things every day. We're experts in the field. Domenico especially has been researching and developing AI for the better part of 30 years. We're on steering committees that are chaired with Microsoft and Google and IBM and other big players, as well as a lot of smaller players, including ourselves. So we're contributing towards a big picture discussion that is, it's supposed to shape legislation, but I'm sure the information goes nowhere. Now, in the last couple of weeks, I've seen a lot of posts on social media in regard to AI and its impact on the industry. A lot of industry leaders, people that like to think of themselves as industry leaders, are kind of presenting these points of view, and they're objectively flawed. They're wrong, right? Will AI reshape the mortgage industry? Yes. Okay, categoric, yes, it will. There's no question about it. We've seen it. Now, many of you will be aware that we ran an experiment a couple of years ago where we replaced a broker with an AI. We cut down application times to about 3 hours. We recently reran that experiment where, keeping in mind, we ran that experiment in ChatGPT, in fact, pre-ChatGPT 3 days, so we were fairly limited in what we can do. We built our own voice synthesizer and things like that for making phone calls and so on. However, the development in AI has been so significant that we ran it again, this time on contact lists. Mainly LinkedIn databases and things like that, known lists that are owned by a user, where they have an email and a phone number. With our new voice drop system, we were able to make personalized phone calls. We were able to send personalized voice drop messages, which was 90% of the function of the telco system. So it was synthesized in the broker's own voice and addressed an individual by name and so on, and crafted a specific message based on industry and a whole bunch of other factors. The generative system had some instructions there. It was incredibly effective. For us, it proved just once again that the industry is going to change. The point is we have to change with it. We can't just ignore the impending doom, particularly when the likes of Microsoft and IBM and others are building products to compete in the finance market. They're building platforms and supporting third parties who are building platforms that will compete head on with aggregation. They want to disrupt the finance industry, probably for the second or third time in its entire lifetime. It's going to be very significant, and it will take shape very, very quickly. So once it's introduced, it'll happen very quickly. One of the comments I read on Facebook in one of these groups, keeping in mind there are a number of forums, a number of groups, and I read this stuff and I take screenshots and share it in forums where people kind of have a better understanding, and we discuss it in a far different way. But one of the comments said, well, offshore processing staff will be the first to go. Brokers are there for the long-term kind of thing. First of all, processing staff should already be gone, right? Aggregation should have introduced AI measures already in order to relieve that burden from brokers entirely. It's a very cost-effective service. An AI system for a small group of people that doesn't require 300,000 computers, which is the case with OpenAI, it can be implemented very quickly and efficiently and easily, and any aggregation group or any small business even can have its own large language model that is trained specifically on information that they want it trained on. So become an expert on something very, very quickly. That includes an expert on your own client database and so on. So it's able to handle a lot of those things that were formerly programmatic, like post-settlement and repricing and all that sort of stuff on the periphery. Now, in terms of replacing brokers, the last place you should be looking for objective answers is a broker group who has something to lose or gain. But and certainly a group that doesn't really understand the implications of the technologies that are being developed. So in order to shape a proper opinion, you have to go well outside of finance. You have to expose yourself to the real world and have a look at what's happened to some other industries, particularly in the US, where accountants are under threat, and a real imminent threat from complete replacement by AI, to the point where some are projecting that it may not actually be a profession in a few years. Like, it's really, really significant. Now, the experiment we most recently ran replaced the broker entirely again on a LinkedIn database. It was complied with all AMC's laws. One of the biggest threats to the mortgage industry right now is AI-based robocalling, and that should be addressed by legislation ASAP, because that's a real significant problem. There's no accent, there's no echo in a VoIP line from a call center in New Delhi and so on. Like, the potential for AI in an authoritative voice with a wealth of information can be very persuasive, despite the fact it's coming from a criminal call center. Now, and it might originate from a legitimate call center in Australia. The point is, you won't know the difference. The returns we garnished from that short experiment, we shut it down after 2.5, nearly 3 days, because the results were ridiculous. They were ridiculous. It was like fishing in a barrel. It was so easy to do, and all of those people we spoke to in the end, or not me, but those people that the brokers spoke to, had dealt with other brokers. So every loan that progressed through to application or even settlement was a potential clawback for the other broker. And that's one of the issues that I see with AI, is because there'll be a constant assessment, there'll be constant turnarounds at the same time, and there'll be clawback, all sorts of things are going to happen. But certainly, one thing we can't do is say that the technology is not evolved enough, and it's not, right? Never will be. AI is essentially has a will of its own. The entire development of mobile phones, for example, the introduction of phones back in the 70s through to present day smartphones, has taken the better part of 50 plus years, really. And we've seen that entire development cycle take place in just 3 or 4 years now, right? And we're projecting, 5 years ago, we were projecting AI-based supercomputers within 10 to 40 years. No one could really pin a number on it now. Those that are developing those systems, and they're sort of spearheading the quantum PC development, or quantum PC, but quantum development, are now saying 3 to 5 years, right? And that is only a relatively recent development. We are under threat, right? The writers in America, who wrote for TV and movies, went on strike because the potential for AI to interrupt or disrupt their industry. The same thing is happening to us, but the industry is doing nothing. And I think that has a lot to do with the leadership, and those people that are meant to be fighting for us don't know what's going on. Now, again, if I lean back on this thread in Facebook, there were some comments there along the lines of people will always want to talk to a broker. In fact, I think one guy mentioned, in fact, 2 or 3 guys mentioned, one of them who runs a business that is powered 15% by AI, which is essentially the application uploads and stuff, which is the bread and butter stuff, guys. When we start to show what we've done, you'll have an appreciation of what I'm talking about now. But a lot of people said, oh, look, 80%, 90% are always going to want to talk to a broker. And that's always the case with early adoption. There's always a small number of people that are happy to lean into new technology. If we take another approach, do you remember when, well, you wouldn't remember, none of us would, John Glenn, I think, first person to orbit the Earth back in, 1962. And before he boarded, there was a movie made about this some time back, before he boarded his little rocket, he asked that Katherine Johnson, I think her name was, who was a 44-year-old black woman at the time. She was called the numbers girl within the ranks at NASA, and she was asked to double check the numbers because John Glenn didn't trust the IBM 7090 supercomputer. I think it was this room-sized supercomputer. It was massive, but the computer at the time objectively did a better job than Katherine Johnson, because she was well and truly influenced by bias. She was prone to human error and all sorts of things. So the results garnished from the computer were more effective than what she had done. I guess he wanted her to check it, you know. But again, she was biased because she knew what the result was, so she was always leaning into that. There's a whole other back end to that story. It takes time for people to adopt, and we're seeing an adoption of technology now, an adoption with AI that exceeds the adoption of any other technology we've ever seen in our digital lifetimes. So if it sounds like I'm venting a little bit, I really am, because I'm seeing some information online that is just not valid. We need to lean on our leadership and say, hey, this is happening in the background. What are you doing to mitigate? What conversations are you having with parliamentarians so they can introduce legislation to prevent robocalling, to prevent, you can't replace, you can't stop the development of AI. There are a whole lot of people calling for it years ago, headed by Elon Musk, but you're not going to stop it. But what you can do is put limitations on how it's used, particularly in the finance industry, because those, I don't know the word for it, but those things that are potentially going to be introduced within maybe days, maybe months. I don't know, because I don't know who else is doing what we've done. But things like robocalling really, really, really have to be addressed. Again, you won't know the difference between see, our voice drop system, we've got an AI voice drop system. You type in text, or you give it contextual understanding, which happens in real time. It's programmatic. So it happens on the back end, where AI feeds a trigger system with an understanding of something, and if there's a need to contact a client, it will. And it does that in your voice. It is persuasive. It sounds like you. It is you for all intents and purposes, at least from the client perspective, particularly when it's sent as a voice drop, which is a degraded quality anyhow, so people don't expect perfection. So what we've done there, in company with real-time phone calls, which again is a service provided to everyone through OpenAI now, the ChatGPT systems API will handle that use case where they've got real-time conversational AI, voice-generated systems, and it's extremely high quality, and it can emulate anybody's voice. Those sorts of systems can be used by criminals just as easily as they can by me or you. So that's opening up this can of worms when it comes to potential fraud and how to address that and mitigate that. And we need to do that now. It's just not nude celebrities on porn sites and things that people seem to talk about all the time, but they don't talk about those things that will impact us every single day. So anyway, my rant is just that. It's a rant. I just want the industry to be more proactive with what's happening. We continue to build functional systems, and that's consumer-focused systems. Our AI, apart from voice drops, which are all AI generated now, at least when they have to be, most of them are recorded by an individual. But I think that's the path that we're going to take, at least for the time being. We're not going with this. There's no way on earth we would release the system that we built for the purpose of this test. And we did it in 2 days, and the volume we generated in less than 3 days is more than 100 brokers probably making 5 years. It was ridiculous. Like, it's just ridiculous. When you've got a computing power making call after call after call, or dropping voice drops on people. And I got to stress again, this went before the AMCA. It is compliant. It was compliant with legislation. So everything we did was within the limits of the law as it applies now. But we certainly tickled boundaries. So we needed to get a ton of legal advice before we pursued this. And I kind of wish I didn't. I lose sleep over it, because if we don't do it, somebody else will. And therein lies the problem. And that is the industry is well and truly under threat. It is a war. And we've got this stagnant sort of, leadership that bounces around with unicorns and fairies and everything else in terms of the information that they're kind of sharing with people. And it's not our job. Certainly it's not the job of any industry leader to mollycoddle or provide passive information that does nothing but provide false reassurance. We need to be confronting and engaging and speak a specific truth. And that is not being done. Again, if you want to talk to me about this, like we deal with this every day, we deal with AI in some respect every single day. We've got our own large language models. We train on all sorts of things and everything. So if you want to talk to me, by all means, give me a call. Look, our office number is 1300 235 433. My direct number is 0400 777 300. But guys, I just want everyone to get ahead of this. And if you haven't replaced offshore processing at this point with AI, at least by 80%, then you've fallen behind. Right? We talk about growth and scale all the time. AI is becoming the ultimate tool and mechanism for the purpose of both of those. You can't scale without growth, and growth provides pressure. You know what I'm getting at. So, by all means, guys, give me a call. But until then, take care. Bye-bye.